Hello, Mr. Hescock's Life Science 7A guys. We are into chapter 12. This is section 2. What is a decomposer is your warm-up question. A decomposer is something that breaks down dead plants or animals. The homework should be submitted in Google Classroom from yesterday. We'll talk a little bit about a couple types of consumers, and then we're going to hit food chains and food webs. And your review on page 281, there are 10 questions there you'll have to read. If you have any questions, make sure you email me and let me know. But let's get started. Identify the pictures as either producers or consumers. Now in this, we're going to talk primary consumers, tertiary consumers, secondary, that type of thing, and we'll do herbivores. So here we have a snail that is eating the leaves, so that makes it a herbivore. But also, it's a primary, as it is feeding right off of the consumers. These are bananas. Bananas are the producer here. Here we have a monkey eating the banana. So that makes it a primary consumer, or oftentimes you'll see them called omnivores because monkeys will eat other things like us. We'll go ahead and call this an omnivore. Kind of review some of our terms. Here we have hyenas eating a dead kill. So they're scavengers. So usually this is going to make them a secondary or even tertiary. This is probably them being secondary consumers. The giraffes are herbivores, they're primary consumers. The one with a zero is how you abbreviate primary. Apples are producers, they're plants, hence their produce. Black bears are usually some sort of secondary, but we're going to write omnivore because they can eat a lot of things. So he could be a primary, a secondary, or a tertiary because it depends on what the bear was actually eating. White-tailed deer only eat plants, they're herbivores. Only primary. Now a wolves are carnivores. So it's usually a secondary. What are food chains and food webs? A food chain is a way of showing how an organism gets its food. It has to start with a producer and leads through a series of consumers. Ocean food chains often start with phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are these tiny little creatures that float in the ocean. They act like plants. Please don't confuse them with the plankton from SpongeBob. That has nothing to do with it. Land's food chains almost always start with plants. Create at least one food chain with the following organisms. So you could take any of these and make your food chain. So let's go ahead and make one. So if we do grass to cow to little boy eating the hamburger, there's a food chain. It could be strawberry to to fox. And you could make probably several different more there. Food webs are basically overlapping food chains. So you may have 3, 4, 5. Food webs are useful because very few things eat only a single food. Panda bears eat only bamboo. Koala bears eat only eucalyptus. But if you think about your day, on any given day, you eat 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 different things. And that allows you to see different relationships by looking at a food web because so many things eat a variety. This food web here I've used in the past. This is a food web for the Chesapeake Bay, starting with phytoplankton and some aquatic vegetation, working our way up through the ducks and the fish, and eventually you hit the top of the food chain. Our tertiary are the bald eagle and the osprey, and each one feeds on something else. So zooplankton feed on the phytoplankton, the zooplankton get eaten by the little fish get eaten by the big fish, and those big fish can be eaten by the bald eagle, who are very big predator fish eating birds. All right, guys, so that is the end of the notes. Let's jump to the book. All right, so this is the reading. This is page 280. The objective of this section was to construct food chains and food webs and show how they are related and show their food relationships. A food chain is a way of showing how energy from food moves through populations and organisms in a community. The food web is a way of showing how food chains are related. Food chains. Organisms in a community are related by how they get their food. A food chain is a way of showing how the energy from food moves through populations of organisms. Every organism is part of a food chain. Figure 12-4 shows a food chain. The arrows in the food chain show the direction that food and energy move along the chain. A producer or part of a producer is always the first link of a food chain. This food chain starts with phytoplankton, kind of like the one I just showed you. So phytoplankton to mussels to the gull. Most chains have no more than 5 links. There's less energy available at the last link than at the first. We actually will talk about that later. It's called the rule of 10. Only 10% gets through. Because energy of things, this is because every time the energy passes from one organism to the other, a portion of the energy is lost. Each consumer loses energy through activities such as searching for food and escaping predators and just doing general things that it has to do to live. So, food webs. Do you eat the same food every meal every day? Now, I know kids who eat a lot of chicken nuggets, but that's not all they eat. Neither do organisms. Most producers and consumers are part of several food chains. A food web shows how several food chains are related. There's the food web there. The mussel can eat either phytoplankton or seaweed. Likewise, the hairy gull can eat mussels, the urchin, the sea star, or the prawn. Most organisms in a food chain eat more than one type of food. Many organisms are also the food source of more than one organism. The phytoplankton can be food for the mussel or the sea urchin. The mussel can be food for the herring gull, the lobster, the seagull, the sea star, or if they would have put it on there, it could be humans. So you guys have these questions coming up. What type of organism is always the first link in a food chain? It is always a producer. What do the arrows show in a food chain? The arrows show the direction which food moves and energy from one organism to the next. Why is there less energy at the end of a food chain? Because each organism uses some of the energy and it is lost in the organism's living life activities. What is a food web? A food web is a chart showing overlying food chains, many different food chains. Minnows are small fish that eat plant materials. Bass are large fish that feed on minnows. Would you expect to find more minnows or more bass in a pond? Minnows feed directly on the plants, so therefore there's more energy available to the minnows, and a bass is going to eat a lot of minnows over the course of a year. So it takes lots of minnows to support one bass or multiple bass. So the more smaller fish, there's got to be much more smaller fish. What organisms eat seaweed? Well, if you come back to this up here, the organisms that eat seaweed, you have to track this. So here, the sea urchin is eating seaweed, and the prawn is eating seaweed. How many primary consumers are in this food web? So you have to come up here. Our primary consumers are the mussels, the urchin, and the prawn. So there are 3 of them. Does a seal eat a lobster or a mussel? So according to this, the seal eats the lobster, it does not eat the mussel. Is a pollock a producer or a consumer? Well, pollock is a fish, so it has to be a consumer. And it says which organisms are tertiary consumers. So tertiary consumers on here could be the herring gull or the seal. And that's the only thing I see on there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to the end of the lesson. You guys that were paying attention and actually watching my videos, this should be really helpful come time to do your homework. Until next time, I'm Mr. Prescox. Be good, be safe. I'll be seeing you.